Hello, dear viewers, and welcome to Creative Society TV. Today, we have a very special guest, Foster Gamble. He's a researcher, co-writer, and visual designer of the documentary Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take? And Thrive 2, This is What It Takes. Foster Gamble is actually a good friend of the Creative Society project, and we're very honored to have him again as a guest today with us. And we will discuss about manipulation and deception in the current format of our society, and as well, the only way out, the Creative Society, of course. Today with us, co-hosting Olga Schmidt from the US. Hello, Olga. And yes, we would like to start already with our first question, Foster. How does our consumer format makes us slaves? Do you have any specific examples on that? How do you see this issue?
Well, you know, if a few people want to control billions of people, they're not going to be able to do it by force. They're not going to be able to do it honestly. They're going to have to fool people into agreeing to let them rule. So the people who want to rule other people have been studying this for centuries. And they've gotten, unfortunately, very good at it. And what it comes down to essentially is that they need to get a hold of children at a very young age and then convince them through constant propaganda that they should surrender their individuality, their freedom, their creativity, because those go together, to the state, to the idea of the group, rather than the honoring of individual sovereignty. So how do they do that? Well, the government wants to take over the schools, so then that they can control the curriculum. Then the government and whoever is running the government, because above the government are the bankers, the international banks, the secret societies. That ruling pyramid wants to use, first of all, the schools, and they've done it very effectively all over the world, including in the United States now. And then they need to control the media. In the United States, they've taken over Hollywood, over the last 2 generations. They've taken over the mainstream media, and the media has become a sales arm for the pharmaceutical companies and an enforcement arm for the New World Order, really this push toward a one world government with the banking elite in charge. So if they've got the schools, they've got the entertainment, they've got the media, and they've really got the government. Because the government's lying to us all the time as well. So who are they working for? And once again, you follow up who's paying for the politicians. It's the multinational corporations, it's the banks, it's the secret societies, the international hedge funds where they organize all this money. But in every single sector, the game, the scheme is to, first of all, fool people into believing that they should give up their freedom. Secondly, if anyone dissents from that, they should be shamed. They should be banished from their workplace, from their society. And if they still object, then they should either be fined money or they should be put in jail. And, we've seen this in countries all over the world. It never works in the long run, but in the short run, it can create a tremendous power mechanism, and it can injure or kill millions and millions of people. For the first time now, we're in the situation where it's not just a country or a region. They're trying to do now the entire world. And one way to do that is to fool people into thinking that buying things is the source of meaning in life. So if I can just get some money and I can buy a new car or a fancier a suit of clothing or something like that, or a bigger house, somehow that's going to give me the meaning the value, the sense of self-esteem that I'm looking for in life. Of course, that never works either. And now people are waking up to all of this. And with the internet, I think we are just now passing the tipping point where humanity is realizing this game. They're saying no. And they're beginning to create the antidotes, the solutions to this whole scheme.
Yes, thank you so much. And you did mention that it starts early with, the kids and so on in the schools. Are there any techniques that are used today, those techniques to manipulate people that are used maybe through the internet? Maybe it's fear or something else that are still used today for people like us?
Absolutely. Fear is the basic one. Just even in school, if you start kids competing against each other and resenting each other, whether it's because of performance in school or race or age or religion or any way to get them against each other, then it creates a tension and to relieve the tension, the children think, well, I just need to be good. I need to behave. I need to be obedient. And at that moment, they stop their own curiosity. The natural love of learning that each one of us is born with, that natural creativity to express ourselves, that gets buried by fear. And once the authoritarians have people of any age, but especially children, scared enough, then they can start indoctrinating them into doing things and believing things that they wouldn't otherwise. So as people get older, it goes beyond the fear. Those who would want to control us rig the economic system so that most people are struggling just to pay their rent. So they're afraid constantly economically. They're eating bad food. They're breathing bad air. They're afraid of wars that are encroaching on their people. And that's part of the scheme, is this relentless cycle of fear. It's really a kind of torture. And they have studied this. The would-be controllers have studied this through their concentration camps, through their MK Ultra mind control programs and so forth. They've studied how to take over control of a single person's mind. And they learned enough about how to do that they're now trying to use those same strategies on all of humanity. And that's what we need to realize so that we can stand up for ourselves. We can say no to authority, and we can reclaim the aliveness, the sense of intimacy, of love, of connection, and as your team says, of natural creativity that really is our birthright.
Foster, that's really amazing. I couldn't have expressed this better and so comprehensive as you did. And you touch upon a very important issue, which is wars. And we have been taught to think that wars are natural for the development of our civilization, so to say, a path of progress. But in your opinion, can our society exist without wars? Is it possible?
It not only can exist without wars, it will only continue to exist if we stop wars. We now have the weapons to destroy all of humanity very quickly. So we actually, for the first time in history, we need to figure this out as a species if we're going to survive. And to me, there's two main keys that open the door to a free and thriving society. And the first is a universal morality. We have been missing that. Morality used to be the person with the biggest club, and then it was the most powerful church, and then it was the most powerful state, making the rules. But what we have been missing throughout recorded history as a species is a universal morality that's not based on some leap of faith or someone else scaring you into believe it, but it's intrinsic to all of us. And probably the most exciting discovery of my life is coming across what the philosophers call the non-aggression principle, which simply states that no one is allowed to initiate force or fraud against anyone else except in true self-defense. Now, that sounds obvious, like, oh, that's the golden rule. Of course, yeah, I believe in that. But then over 95% of humanity turns right around and turns over their power to their government. And a government would not exist except for taking your money against your will, which is a violation of the non-aggression principle. And that's why every government throughout history has been corrupt. It's not just because there are a few bad apples, but it's because government, the very notion of a few people seizing authoritarian rule over others, is corrupt at its core. It starts by stealing your money. So this leads into the second key to ending war, which is if you don't have a government, an involuntary authority, then what happens is you don't have a state, you don't have a nation state, and you will not have wars. You cannot have wars without nation states. The only way that the government sends an army to do these virtually always immoral wars of aggression and imperialism and theft of resources and so forth is because they can either take the money from their people, or they can print the money with machines, or just create it digitally on a computer and then use that fake money or stolen money to go wage war. If they had to actually go to the people, these so-called leaders, and say, okay, we want to go into the Middle East and take their oil and change their banking system and take their gold and destroy their culture. Hey, who's with me? Everybody would say, no, we're not going to do that. So they have to fool people into surrendering their power and therefore surrendering their money. So both of those are huge conversations, but they're still the key. One is no one is allowed to aggress against anyone else except in real self-defense. And two is that without the nation state, you cannot go to war.
Yes, thank you. And you know, this brings us to a very important point, because the whole base of the consumer society that we live in today is to divide and conquer, because small groups of people are easier to manipulate and easier to control. And I think we see more and more divisions that are artificially set up between us people. It doesn't matter what it's on, religion, faith, parties. I mean, it doesn't matter. You know, today we have more and more things that divide us. Yet the creative society is based on unification, giving that platform for the unification of people, because we've been divided for the past 6,000 years. And in your opinion, how important is it today to start actually sharing this information, to talking to everyone, informing everyone about the fact that we need to unite, because this is our last chance. You know, in the time of these global crises, we need to unite and we need to build the creative society.
Well, it's absolutely critical. I could not possibly over-exaggerate it, because the fate of each one of us, of our children, of our grandchildren, of our species and the planet actually hangs in the balance. And I want to make one important distinction. I've got nothing wrong with consuming. You know, each of us buys things. We need to buy things in order to survive. We need to actually exploit nature in order to survive. We need food, we need water, we need air, and so forth. But the key is not violating it in the process. So, of course, we need to access vegetables and water and so forth, but we don't need to destroy ecosystems in the process. And that's the key, is live in harmony with nature, consume as you will, but not in violation of other people. When, you know, some people are going to choose to have fancier things than others. Some people will be more successful than others, and they can afford to buy better things and so forth. And that's fine. That's not where wars come from. It's not where meaning comes from either. But if we have a true free market where people are free to create products, they're free to buy products, as long as they're not stealing, as long as they're not forcing, and as long as they're not destroying ecosystems in the process, then that natural free market will intrinsically lead to a society which is happier, which is more secure, and which is more prosperous. And I believe that we have crossed the tipping point, and that we're more and more going to see these controllers exposed. We're going to see them going to jail. We're going to see them making restitution to the people that they have illegally and immorally stolen their money and their businesses and their health and so forth. And I'm actually more confident than I've ever been, in 20, 30 years, because I see what's happening all over the world. There are freedom groups, truth groups emerging, literally hundreds of thousands of them all over planet Earth, including, Alatra is one of the most inspiring ones, but you're not coming together around a particular religion. You're not coming together around how you're going to rule people. You're coming together around fundamental human principles that every being is drawn toward, of truth, of freedom, of creativity. And this, to me, is the most exciting thing I've ever seen. What a time to be alive when we can not only see that transformation, but we can be a vital part of creating that transformation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And you said it absolutely correctly that, consuming is good, but as long as we're in harmony. But, today we also see that we're consuming each other too. We see so much human trafficking and slavery, and, those numbers are just increasing drastically. And it's so sad that we live in such a society. But as you said, again, we have, we see the transformation happening. And I wanted to ask you this too. Do you actually see more and more people waking up and speaking up and actually start understanding that the manipulation that we've been under for so long?
It's huge. I've never seen anything like it. I didn't think that it would happen necessarily in my lifetime. Unfortunately, a lot of it is because of the wars, the lockdowns, the fake health scares, the fake climate change scares, and so forth. It's had to get that bad to have people actually be affected in their own lives. That people who didn't want to hear any of this quote unquote, conspiracy nonsense, all of a sudden they lost their business and they don't understand why. All of a sudden they're sick from an injection that was never proven safe. And it goes on and on. So more and more people, including in my own family, we have in our family a firefighter, 3 nurses, a doctor who are now waking up to these realities because they weren't allowed to go to work. Their entire career, their pensions were being stolen because they didn't want to get an injection that they didn't trust. And so they've gotten involved in lawsuits, which they're winning. The mandates are being lifted. They're going back to work. But in the process, millions and millions more human beings have gone, okay, I can't afford to blindly trust authority anymore. I need to take responsibility for my own health, my own prosperity, my own family, really my own planet.
This is indeed amazing, Foster, what you say. And this is so motivating. How you see this, that actually we reached this tipping point and humanity has been squeezed in so badly and so deprived of freedom, of creativity, of our core human values of humanity, of love, of friendship, of help, that indeed it had to come to this point where we have to take this evolutionary step and bottom up, that we start and we reshape humanity and we unify humanity. This is actually happening now in parallel to some processes going on in the core of our Earth. We are actually experiencing now some very bad times, and actually the worst is still to come. And this depends also on our choice and which path we take. And if we put science to the real use and that it should serve humanity or not. You mentioned climate change. We live in a global time of changes. The time is running out to find a way to combat what is really to come, the true climate change. Yet we've been told a lot about CO2. What do you think about CO2? Is CO2 the cause of climate change, the anthropogenic factor, as we've been told time and again? And if you go to all media outlets, we've been told only about the CO2 story and that we have to pay more tax and the carbon tax and we have to buy the quotas and maybe just lock us at home and with no fridge or no way to cook or no stove or something. What is your position on this actually really critical issue, actually?
Yeah, I think you guys are doing fabulous work on this because you have really dived deep into the distinctions, into the key facts and evidence, because what is being perpetrated by the media, especially funded by the bankers, is this anthropogenic global warming. And I've written extensively about the whole history. I've followed the money on this, and it's a total scam to get us to surrender our money to a global carbon tax, our authority to a global police state, and ultimately even our laws to a one world government. And this is fully documented for anyone who actually wants to know, to understand. At the same time, and also the CO2, plants need CO2. CO2 has been considerably higher than it is now, multiple times throughout history, and the plants have thrived on it. The key is the pollution is a problem. So we need to stop our polluting at a reasonable pace so that we don't give up our health and our economy by just destroying production and our quality of life. But I personally know that free energy devices already exist. We can get all of our energy with no pollution already as soon as those devices are allowed out to society. That's one more proof to me that whole anthropogenic global warming thing is a scam. And, Al Gore, the guy who created the Inconvenient Truth, he won't debate anybody in public about this topic, because in his movie, he shows that CO2 and Earth's temperature go together throughout history. And he's right about that, but he's got it completely backwards. And the final scene, the famous scene in that movie where he's on the forklift and, the hockey stick graph goes up and he goes up and he points out to see, this is, we're going to destroy the earth and everything. What he's missing, first of all, the hockey stick part of it has been fudged, and that was decided in a court of law, and they made that up. But the fact that the two follow each other, it turns out that when the temperature goes up, then the CO2 goes up. And that's been happening. It leads by anywhere from 10 years to 200 years. And so he's got it completely backwards in order to try to scare us. And he knows this. That's why he won't debate it in public. And that's why throughout his entire career in the US Senate, he was basically a shill for nuclear and coal power. So he's not exactly the environmentalist that he portrays himself to be. Now, all that aside, the type of science that you guys have been handling, that you've been